Hello and welcome to episode number 135, where I chat with Amy Wheeler about the Yamas and the Niyamas. Now, these are moral codes or right ways of living given to us by yoga. And I think that this is a wonderful time to discuss these as we try to navigate the world post-COVID-19. So please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now here's the show. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. I'm very happy to welcome back our regular guest, Amy Wheeler, today. Hello, Amy.
Good morning or good afternoon for you.
Yes. How are you doing?
I feel as happy and content as I have felt in years. I'm not saying that everything is easy with the pandemic that we're experiencing, but I've just feel like I had a pause. I get to press the reset button and make some hard decisions for the future to not go back to the life that I had prior to the pandemic.
Right. And I think this is what's happened now. Like, we're recording this May 22nd. We're all pretty much coming out of confinement now, starting slowly. And we've all had this time to reflect and force time to be more still. And I think today's conversation on the Yamas and the Niyamas is perfect. As we all come out of deconfinement, and had this time of reflection, it's really good to review these as a guide to how to go forward. So you're saying in your own experiences, you don't want to go back to that old life.
I don't, and I won't. I haven't quite figured out, I guess through the Yamas and Niyamas, I will find a way not to overcommit myself, I should say, to the life that I was living in terms of travel and opportunities and saying yes to too many things. I just don't want to go back there. I have such a feeling of contentment and peace and even, non-violence to myself. I was pushing myself way too hard.
Yeah, you traveled a lot last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly. That was in regards to being the president of the Yoga Therapy Association.
Right. And as we're going to look at today, these yamas and niyamas, they build on one another. So if you're missing ahimsa or nonviolence to yourself, all the other ones start to fall down too, because that's the foundation of, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. They're building.
They build
one.
Yeah. Yeah, and anyone who has studied yoga, or gone through yoga training, would have studied the Yamas and Niyamas, but I'd love for you to explain to us, as you take us through them, obviously, which each of them are, but also to start with, what are the Yamas and the Niyamas for those people out there who are not familiar? And I also want to let people know that we do have a visual aid with this Yama-Niyama discussion, and you can find that download in the show notes. So just go ahead to the show notes and click on the download for this episode, and you'll have a visual aid to go along with what Amy's explaining today.
The way that I learned it from Mr. Deskachar at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram are that we have the 5 yamas first because they are how we interact socially in the world, starting with our mother and eventually our family, and then eventually our close, friends that know the family, that as the baby, emerges into the world over time, it learns these social disciplines through its mother, through the family, and eventually all of society. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's a really beautiful way to think of it. And, that the stage of life that we are supposed to get these yamas firmly established is before the age of 8 or 9. And then if that's happened, it carries with us throughout the rest of our lives, hopefully. And, we have to keep coming back and working and practicing. And, what Deskachar would say is nobody's perfect. None of us. We're this idea that we're going to achieve them perfectly in this lifetime is not realistic. It's something that will be a work in progress over time. And so once we have these kind of yamas in a stable condition in the heart of us, then we can start to really work on the niyamas, which are our personal disciplines. And how do we take care of this body, mind, spirit, this precious human vessel that we have in this world? And that actually happens second, which is so interesting. I think many of us would think that you'd take care of yourself, and then that would allow you to interact socially in an appropriate way. But the way Patanjali has framed this is he's saying, no, you learn your yamas first before your niyamas. And it is through your social interactions, and once you've established that you really can take good care of your own being, your own vessel. So I just think that's beautiful that the niyamas come second, and that all of it is, like I said, a foundation where the foundation of the building is Ahimsa, nonviolence, and everything else gets built on top of that, like a 10-floor building. Beautiful.
Well, I look forward to going through each of these, and just to explain to people that they do originate from the Yoga Sutras, right? Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and the yamas and niyamas are part of the 8 limbs of yoga.
Right. So we should say they are the first 2 limbs of the Ashtanga 8-limb path. There are other niyamas and yamas in many other traditions of yoga. Sometimes there's 10, sometimes there's 20. So this is just the Patanjali path that we're talking about today.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, please take us through them, because I love that they build on top of each other, and I think it's so interesting. And also, like I said earlier, great ways of living to reflect as we come out of deconfinement, and we're all at this time of reflection, and how do we want to see this next portion of our lives. And I think these are great codes to live by.
Absolutely. And like I said, a work in progress, right?
Absolutely. Lifelong.
Yeah. So our first ahimsa is nonviolence. And that nonviolence is not just to others, but it truly probably does start deep inside each one of us. And I think it's very difficult to be nonviolent to others without also having that self-compassion and tenderness and vulnerability to ourselves, right? That even though Patanjali is saying we learn this from our mother, I think as we're interacting with her, we're internalizing that tenderness and sweetness inside of us, towards us, which then blossoms out towards others. So it's interesting. I've been watching the yoga community during the pandemic, and I include myself in this, how we have really been attacking each other for all of our beliefs and opinions and values around the pandemic.
Oh, dear.
Have we not? I mean, have you looked at Facebook?
I'm not in any big yoga communities on Facebook, I have to say.
Oh, it's been a real disaster. And I find myself getting drawn into it also. I mean, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying, like, we are really not being tender and caring and kind to one another. And I understand we all have opinions about how society should move forward. But I think, step number one is to get self-compassion, get tenderness, go towards those feelings of fear and vulnerability inside of me before I start lashing out and giving my opinion to everybody else, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what I've been working on is I'll type up a response and then I'll erase it and be like, okay, Amy.
You get it out there and then by typing it and then you erase it. But that's good. And that's the thing. It's having that space, right? Having that space in between hitting send.
Right. I mean, I wish I didn't have those thoughts, but I do still. And I think many others do. But Absolutely. What is happening when we practice ahimsa or nonviolence is that eventually we learn to get more detachment from the outcome, which is, it's hard in the pandemic, don't get me wrong, but we stop blaming and have all these negative thoughts and words and actions. We may still have some thoughts about these things, but we kind of pull back a little bit and do our internal work because, again, the yamas are about how we're going to externally socialize with people, but usually it really does come down to our internal work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting when you look at ahimsa in terms of the pandemic, it's acceptance of the situation and acceptance that we have to let go because we have no control over this and nobody knows for sure what's going on or, where it originated from or what's going to happen. So there is a real letting go and just accepting of what is.
Well, and that's exactly what leads to the next yama, which is Satya or Satyam. Being able to speak the truth in a way that other people can hear it. And that's where the rubber hits the road. Like, first of all, I don't think any of us really know. The scientists don't even know much about this virus. And yet all of us are experts on Facebook, are we not?
Oh, yeah.
So the truth in a way the other can hear. There's two parts to that. Number one, I don't even know the truth. And number two, can I let my words pass through the gates of how will the other person be able to hear this? Not, I have an opinion and you need to shut the heck up and listen to me because I'm right and you're wrong. But let's pretend I did know about COVID and I did know what the world needed to do, which none of us does. But how could I say that to the people who really have a different opinion than me? Where could we find common ground? Where could we? I had a little blip yesterday on Facebook where someone had said, don't blame the administration for anything that's happening in the United States. It's not their fault. None of us know about, COVID. This is not President Trump's fault and blah, blah, blah. And I found myself wanting to say, wait a minute, when we're in leadership, and I've been in leadership, we are responsible. We are leaders. That's what we've been hired to do. But then I thought to myself, well, how can I say this in a way that she might be able to hear me without attacking Trump, without giving any opinions about the current leadership in the United States? That's not the point. The point is there a way I could say it that the other person might be able to hear a little bit of what I want them to hear? And that was really hard to figure that out. And I don't know if I did. It seemed like I did, but I had to really think carefully how not to be reactive and be triggered and spout off, right?
Yeah, and that's created space, but space before you reacted, and that comes with our practices, right? That we don't have that trigger effect and we don't just spout off automatically, that you had time to reflect and give yourself space and really think about how can I be compassionate here and be useful in this situation rather than just reacting, and how can I maybe communicate with this person that's a way that's non-violent and that's more of coming from my truth, but not just being triggered by what they said. So, yeah.
Well, And do you know how I did it? I used Pratipaksha Bhavana, which is to take the opposite perspective. And I thought, okay, what if I were the president? I have been. And there was something that was truly out of my control that spiraled in, and I was responsible for leading my community through it, but it was something I didn't have a lot of control over. Would I want everyone blaming me personally for what's happened? And I wouldn't, right? So I had some compassion there. Now, I'm not saying I would handle it the same way our leadership has, but that gave me that space, that opening to have compassion for myself, have compassion for everyone involved, breathe, feel, and then decide if I even wanted to respond. I mean, sometimes there's no response needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, when we have those thoughts coming up, or those negative thoughts, or those thoughts towards other people, or getting really triggered by a response from somebody, just also reminding ourselves that we are not our thoughts, and more connecting to our true nature, our soul, that those, even though we have those thoughts as well, not to beat ourselves up about them. They're our little ego. They're our protection. They're that, that little fighting ego inside of us trying to protect our identity and so on. But just to know that, to have that self-compassion, that we are not our thoughts, and that isn't our true nature.
I love that. Well, first of all, I told myself, I don't even know the truth about this virus. And then second of all, here I am letting my little ego rear its little nasty head to try to be right about something. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy that this is where we find ourselves in today's times.
Yeah, but but I also think what a huge awareness if we can observe that in ourselves. If we can take that moment of pause and reflect, like, wow, look at me wanting to, go back straight with a response to this person. What is that triggering in me? And what is going on with my ego that I feel that I want to go back with something sharp to that person? So I do think it's a huge educational moment and a moment of awareness if you can catch yourself before you react. That's the key.
Oh,
that is the key.
Yeah. But it also leads to the next block in the building as we build this from the ground up, the Asteya of not stealing. And basically this Asteya is you're releasing your desires, and you're, wanting to take something from another, wanting to steal their words or their ideas or their time or their possessions, and feeling that feeling of I, me, mine, where the ahankara comes in, and I must survive. And, what is it in us, especially around politics these days? We're so polarized. What is inside of us that is saying, I will not survive if I don't conquer and take over and basically, what I consider stealing other people's, even their belief systems. Like they, my brother said this to me once, and I've just found it really profound that, first we had racism where the color of your skin was how we divided ourselves, and then it went to gender issues, and then now it's politics, right? That I am going to take your respect. I'm going to take your identity. I'm going to take your, deepest values and beliefs, and I'm just going to crush them, right? That's
right. But don't you think that's all little ego too? It's all fear-based, and I must survive, and I want to steal your power. I want to, step on top of you. And again, I think this goes back to what we were just talking about. Instead of, going to that extreme of wanting to control, or that little ego really pushing back on another person, instead looking at with awareness and looking at the root of it, just like we do in Ayurveda, looking at the root of disease in the body, looking at the root of this source within you, like where is this coming from? What is this little ego protecting? And what is it inside of us that's feeling fearful or feeling a lack of control? and what's, what is it do we need to nourish in ourselves? Because that, for me, that's just all wanting to steal the power. The ego is just screaming. The little ego is just screaming for attention and protection and is in a lot of fear.
Absolutely. I mean, we can define Asteya as releasing our desires from taking someone else's words or their ideas or their possessions. And I even think when we disagree with someone and say, my way is the right way, and I'm going to crush your belief structure, your ideas, I think that's a form of Asteya.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no common ground there. There's no compassion. It's like you said, it's my way or the highway. And I think it comes down to something, not feeling good enough in the self and not feeling that you can meet a common ground or listen with compassion or be objective and look from another person's point of view, because everyone feels they're right from their own point of view, right?
Yeah. And, I think at the heart of Asteya, which is non-stealing, like, is there enough inside of me to just be with my beliefs and values and be okay with that?
Yeah.
It's hard when you get on that edge of wanting to be a social justice activist. Like I understand that we can't all just sit in our houses and, say, okay, I'm going to let evil happen. Like it's tough because that goes back to Ahimsa, that the bottom of the foundation is nonviolence, right? So these are just great for reflection, really.
It is, because especially at this time where it has been so partisan, particularly in the US, and you're looking at people and you're going, what are they thinking? Why are they doing this? I do not understand. But there has to be almost, like I was saying, compassion, but also wondering, like, what is the basis of this? Why are they so fearful? Why are they so angry? What is going on? What is it in their lives? Where are they coming from that they're experiencing this so differently to me?
Right. And I actually think it's times like this that we should review the Yamas and Niyamas, because, it's so easy to have these discussions in the classroom in a hypothetical way. But when the rubber hits the road and I have to look at myself and how I'm thinking and acting and the words that are coming out of my mouth and how I'm behaving in a difficult situation real time, that's when we get to test our Yamas and Niyamas.
Absolutely. I think this pandemic has been really eye-opening, I'm sure, for everybody, because you get to see how people react to the situation. You get to see people in a new light. We're all very tested like we've never been before. And, it really brings out some unusual behavior sometimes. And sure, we're all vata aggravated right now and all in a state of stress and not knowing. And so it's hard to take those moments of pause, because of course we're all in a little bit of that fight or flight right now, because there is such the unknown. Even though we may be enjoying our time of confinement, and maybe relaxing and maybe calming if we haven't had any situations of people around us who have contracted the virus, but it's also an uncertainty of the future. And I think that leads to a certain underlying level of stress. Like I thought going through this, like I feel pretty calm. My life hadn't shifted much, but then you come into a situation like, oh, okay. It was right there underneath the surface. I thought I was cool, but then, I go into a store and I'm getting a little bit frazzled by people not wearing masks or touching things or something. And then you realize, oh, okay, so there is stress there. So I think those little things can be really eye-opening. And, we've all experienced people reacting to this differently.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that kind of leads us, from Asteya to Brahmacharya, where if we can release these ideas and desires and need to, kind of be right and my way's best and your way's not good, that leads to Brahmacharya. That's, as Desikachar would teach it, and I know different people teach it differently, but is your life here for the highest, for Brahma? And can you live in moderation and not have obsessive thoughts and words and actions? right? Can you allow yourself to not be so grasping for what you and I want? I want so-and-so to wear a mask. I want so-and-so to not touch all the fruit or whatever it is, right? I actually touched too much fruit the other day, and my husband was like, "Stop it! Like, you can't touch the fruit anymore." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, but we can really start to ruminate and have these obsessions about, what we need. How am I going to survive? What everybody else is doing wrong? And instead, could I put my mind on Brahma? Could I be with what is in acceptance? And here's what I've been thinking, and it's a hard thing to think, but I'm trying. Is there a reorganization happening at the highest levels of divinity that could actually benefit humanity in the long run? And the reason I say that's such a hard thing is because I think people of color and people in a lower socioeconomic status, it's not a good reorganization for them. They are not, right? So that's why I say, I don't want to spiritually bypass that and be like, oh, well, society needed a reorganization so Mother Nature can flourish. I mean, that's maybe true, that we need to redistribute the wealth and all of that. And I also have a hard time with that. And this is, again, what I have to give to Brahma, that there are definite losers in this situation that are not surviving because of the reorganization that's happening. And that's tough. That it's just breaking your heart wide open and my heart wide open to see that there are people really, really suffering. And that's the hard part, I think.
Yeah, to see this huge reorganization, but that it's coming with so much suffering is really hard to witness. And can you explain Brahma for people?
Yeah, I think, a traditional way to think of that would be God, right? Mm-hmm. In my mind, it is God, but not the guy with the white beard, more that there is a divine, I don't know if it's a network or what I would call it, but something bigger than us that includes everything in the world, meaning, and beyond the world too, meaning the trees and the grass and the sunshine and us and the animals, but also the really amazing art and literature and music, but also the deep, deep suffering and the pain and the war and the sickness. Like, I think it's all part of Brahma.
It's all part of creation, all part of life.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and then Brahmacharya, which is the step we're on, the fourth one of the Yamas. So that is, like you're saying, it's moderation, it's right use of energy, right? And if we think of that in terms of the pandemic, it's really about self-care, isn't it? And making sure that you're not overexerting yourself in any area and really preserving, as we would say in Ayurveda, your ojas, your life force.
Absolutely. And I think it really asks us to reflect. And this is what I've been thinking about. It's saying, have some self-study about where you are being excessive or not living in moderation. And that's where many of us have taken a pause and said, wow, what was the life I was living before this?
Yeah, right. And I think that's the wonderful thing to come out of it. People really have time to look at and see where they're really extending their energy.
Absolutely. And self-study around, well, what am I going to do differently now that some people are coming out of containment. We don't know if we'll have a second wave, but how am I going to reorganize differently so that I can have prana for the things that are really precious to me and not try to do everything all the time for everyone?
Yeah, so self-care is really important. And also, I mean, more than ever, really taking a handle on our healthcare and being responsible for our own health.
Right.
And part
Absolutely.
of that responsibility, as we know from yoga and Ayurveda, is doing things in moderation. And in our society, unfortunately, especially in the West, we have this no pain, no gain attitude. You know, I was just debating this with somebody yesterday, actually, about no pain, no gain, but how that is not a good philosophy. If we want to live by the yamas of moderation, and it does really deplete us and depletes our ojas and depletes our energy. And so living this life of moderation, the middle road, really is a wonderful way to live.
It is. And in yoga and Ayurveda, we talk about, doing your practice at 60 to 70%, not 99%, right?
Right.
And so then the Brahmacharya, learning to live in moderation and not, have so much excessiveness in our lives, that leads to the fifth yama, the Aparigraha, which is non-possessiveness, non-grasping, and letting our senses go outward and just, I want this, I want that, I need this, I have that, like pulling, like this idea of pratyahara from the eight limb path, where we're taking ourselves inward and being content and satisfied with what we have here and now. I link this one to having gratitude, that I don't always have to be looking for the next thing. I have to be happy with what's in front of me right now, and just have a very peaceful feeling inside of me that I have enough and I am nourished, and it may not look like my car or my house or my clothes is, as perfect as somebody else, but I am well cared for in this life.
Yeah. And we discussed this in the previous podcast episode we did together, like how much do we need? And that contentment with what we have, because of course, stress comes from that wanting more, that needing more, that feeling that we have to acquire something in order to fulfill us, to make us happier, rather than being in the present moment and being content with what we have right now.
Yes. And I'm going to call myself out. I have been doing some ordering of things and having it delivered to my house. And like, do I really need this? Why did I do this? Why did I force some human to package this and drive it to my house for me so that I could open up and have a new foot scrubber or something, like it, I do see myself and others like on these, shopping sprees during the pandemic, that I think that's part of kind of grasping. My senses want something out there that's not already in my house, Yeah.
And it's also grasping for something to entertain us always, I think. I think we all experience that constantly, and we're so entertained these days. We're so used to scrolling on our phones or computers or whatever, and there's constant entertainment, but also not grasping to be constantly entertained and allowing that space. We talk about how important it is to have that space for creativity, inspiration, ideas to enter. And how do we get that creative inspiration for what next if we're constantly entertaining ourselves with exterior stuff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this even goes to what you had talked about earlier, that we don't know the future. There's like this weird space or gap where, the unknown is there. And I find myself having some grasping to know what will happen in the future, to know how this is going to result, to know, will I have work in 6 months, or will all of my yoga therapy trainees have to drop out because they lost their jobs, right? There's this internal gnawing or restlessness, like what's going to happen, and am I going to survive, and what do I need to do now in case something bad happens 2 months from now? There's just this weird internal unease because I'm grasping for security for myself and my family in the future.
Absolutely. I think everybody is experiencing that. We were saying before we hit record, at least I was saying to you that, during lockdown, it was home confinement, you knew the parameters, everyone knew what was going on. But I'm finding this post-lockdown is more strange because we have some potential freedom, but yet things are not the same and nobody's doing things the same way. So everybody's experiencing it differently in that one state versus another state, one country in Europe versus another country. So it's all the unknown. And just like you said, the fact that we don't know what's ahead of us, this is forced us to just be in the now. Yes, we could worry ourselves to death about what's going to happen or try to project ourselves into the future, but nobody knows. We've never experienced this before. Nobody on earth has experienced this before. So we just have to be in this moment right now. And we don't know what's going to happen a few weeks from now and so on. So it really is this forced time to just be. And, to just be with ourselves and just to be like this acceptance of this moment.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but each of the 5 yamas lines up with each of the 5 niyamas. So Ahimsa with Satya, Satya with Santosha, Asteya with Tapas, Brahmacharya with Svadhyaya, Aparigraha with Ishvara Pranidhana. So, they actually match up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's exactly what you said, that the only way we can let go of grasping for what's going to happen in the future is to surrender. Mm-hmm. Ishvara Pranidhana, with no expectations of what will happen in the future. Mm-hmm. Right? That it's through us practicing that non-grasping that we release these feelings and these fears, and we do learn how to surrender. When people say, well, I don't know how to surrender, I say, okay, that's Ishvara Pranidhana. Let's pair that up with the yama that goes with Ishvara Pranidhana, which is non-grasping. So if you want to learn how to surrender, we have the perfect opportunity right here, right now, to practice non-grasping for the future and for what is going to happen to all of us.
And we have to do that. We're forced to do that because the only other alternative is that we stress ourselves, we push ourselves into fight or flight, we, play havoc on our immune system, and we put ourselves in a situation where we're affecting our health. Right? So there is no alternative but to surrender, I feel. Because it's either surrender to what is and accept the situation and the not knowing, which is hard. I'm not saying it's easy. Or be a stress bucket and have all that stress affect everything in your body and your mind.
Right. So I have about 200 college kids that I teach twice a week. And every day I start with, what is your daily routine? Did you work out this morning? Did you eat well? Did you get enough sleep? What are your plans for the day? And that's a way of practicing surrender, to just stay in the present moment and right here, right now. And let's not worry about what's going to happen in September. Let's make sure our self-care and our daily schedule is in alignment. That is how we can not grasp to know the future. And that's how we ultimately can surrender. Just stay right here, right now, and do what needs to be done in this moment.
Yeah. And what comes to my mind, absolutely, Dinacharya, self-care is vital at this time to keep us grounded and nourished and for the body and the mind. But also, thinking of nature and how being in nature is so healing, because nature doesn't rush. Nature is just in the moment, right? Mother Nature takes her time. And I think the more time we can spend in nature now and just being in the moment, it gives us some release and some relief, especially from watching the news.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think if I was to prescribe anything for anybody, we've already talked a lot about the Dinacharya. I do think that is of paramount importance right now. It definitely needed. Your yoga practice and all your daily self-care practices, your Dinacharya, along with every day spending some time in nature.
That's what I'm doing. That's it. That is my solution right there. Routine plus Mother Nature every day. And it's actually working for me. I do feel quite surrendered. I mean, if I allow myself to go forward and think, I get all freaked out. But if I say, nope, we're not going there today, Aim.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a futile process, right? When we start going into these virtual stories of what if, what could happen, it really is just going to play havoc with our body and mind. And we just can't afford that right now. We have to maintain our health, maintain our, our daily self-care practices to keep us in balance.
Right. And I go as far as scheduling work times on my calendar because I have a lot of information that I'm needing to transfer from in-person curriculum to online curriculum. And it feels like a huge weight on my shoulders. And what I did is I went into my calendar and I blocked off a 2-hour block here and a 2-hour block there and to show myself, okay, you can get it all done, but you're only going to bite off 2 hours at a time on any given day. And that's the only thing you need to worry about on that day is, can I get my 2 hours done today?
Right. And that's Ahimsa, right? Non-violence to yourself.
Right.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get to the Niyamas now. So explain to us first what the Niyamas are, and then let's go through them and relate them to the Yamas. That would be amazing.
All right. So if Ahimsa is on the ground floor, and then we build on Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Well, we also build the Niyamas on top of that, right? So there's a 10-floor building. Mm-hmm. But what I also want to connect is that Ahimsa, which is the first yama, is connected to Satya, which is the first niyama. That when we have non-violence, it leads to purity. It leads to cleanliness of the body and the mind that is reflected in our thoughts and our words and our actions. So it's kind of interesting that, how these are laid out. I wish we could show pictorially how they all build on one another, but how they also relate to one another, meaning Ahimsa and Satya are related. And if we can do nonviolence, which leads to purity of body and mind, the result is a peaceful, joyful heart. And so this is interesting to me because we have the result of all of this. And if we don't have a peaceful, joyful heart, well, then we need to go back and look at how is my purity of mind and body, and back to Dinacharya, and then how is my Ahimsa, right? Yeah. So they tell us in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, like, hey, if you're doing this stuff, here's what should happen. Oh, you don't have a joyful, peaceful heart? All right, well, you better go back and look at Satya and Ahimsa.
Right, go back to the root. Go back to Ahimsa. Is there, any self-harm or violence towards myself or others? And it reminds me of that saying when you said it's the purity of body-mind is reflected in your thoughts, your words, your actions. It reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi's quote, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony, which is a peace and joyful heart.
I love that quote. I love that quote.
But it is exactly that, right? If what we think, say, and do are in alignment, we will have a joyful heart because we're not fighting with our true nature.
Well, and that leads us to the next one, right? That purity of what you think, what you say, what you do, that could come back to Satyam, the truth, in a way that others can hear it. This will lead to the niyama of santosha, which is contentment. Contentment that's reflected in your thoughts and words and actions. So what Deskachar used to say, and I always think of this, is that if you have satyam, you're speaking the truth in a kind of way that others can hear, you will have more contentment, santosha, and the results of all of your actions will come to full fruition, meaning that which you set out to do and said you were going to do actually manifests and it happens. So I've always, it's kind of an alignment with the divine, and I've always thought about those projects that just fall apart that I had such great hopes for, and in the middle of it, it's a disaster. And I think, what have I done? How come this won't work? Well, then I have to go look at my santosha, my contentment, and my satyam, my truth, right? So if it's not aligning, something's off. And for me, I've examined this deeply as I've failed at so many things.
We all have.
That it's usually I wasn't honest with myself in the beginning about what I really wanted, how I wanted to manifest, why I wanted to manifest, what were the reasons I wanted to manifest. Like I couldn't even admit it to myself, and therefore I couldn't articulate it to the people I was in community with.
We learn so much from those experiences. Every failure is a learning step, and we grow so much from it, don't we?
Yes, absolutely.
God knows, I've had much experience.
But at the time when you're not feeling very content and nothing is working, it's so disappointing, you know? It's such a great opportunity to go back and say, okay, where did I not speak the truth, think the truth, you know?
When we have that self-contentment as well, it reflects not only in the work we're doing in the world, but also in our relationships around us.
Absolutely. 100%. Yoga is relationships, as Desikachar would say.
Yeah, speaking the truth.
Right. And so this leads to tapas, the discipline, the effort, the willingness to have some friction and move through it. And, you know, tapas is heat. And Desikachar would always say that it's the mental heat. And I think it could be, you know, physical heat and all of that too, but the mental heat to keep pushing forward in spite of the obstacles. And that, you know, that is connected to Asteya, basically having these desires to have it done faster or better, or, you know, whatever it is that we really, really want. Can we just take step by step and do the practice, the effort, the discipline, like I am doing with my big projects of taping everything for my online studies? Just block off 2 hours a day in my calendar to film. That's a lot of effort. It's a lot of discipline, right? But if I just do it that way, the result will be a path that I'm supported and that I have control over my senses. And that's what we're promised, is that we will be able to get done what we need to get done. We will be supported in doing our work, and we won't have our senses going outward, out of control all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I also get from this is that there's no shortcuts on the path to self-realization, right? As you go through this transformation, there's going to be side roads we take. Like you were saying, I've experienced, you go start this project and you're like, oh no, you get burnt, you come back to your yama and go, okay, what wasn't truthful there? What wasn't true to my true nature? But there's no shortcuts. There's no jumping ahead. There's no cliff notes. You got to go through the journey.
Yep. You got to walk on the fire. No doubt. And so that leads us to svadhyaya, which is, you know, studying the sacred texts in relationship to studying ourselves, and really looking at, okay, what's really going on inside of me, and where am I basically not practicing Brahmacharya, or this ability to give it to a higher power, to do my best, to refine myself, to reflect on my actions, and then eventually know that I put in the best work that I can, and whatever happens, happens. And you know, what the Patanjali Yoga Sutra says will result if we can really practice svadhyaya and brahmacharya, because they're related, is we will have strength and vitality, and we will have one pointed focus on the work at hand. That's so beautiful. We'll have the energy to do the work, and we'll stay focused on the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really having that awareness, right? And observing yourself, which I think is very challenging, because we can fool ourselves a lot of the time.
I'm with you on that one.
It's really hard to be objective about yourself.
Not only that, but the samskaras and the vasanas are so deep. Yeah. How could we even ever know if we were fooling ourselves? This is why you say this. We need to remain humble.
And I you know, humble is one of my biggest values. I think that's a huge thing we need more of in the world, and we each need in our own lives. But also having a mentor or coach. I think is really, really important for someone to be really honest with you and reflect back, because I know myself, I can't see things myself sometimes. I need someone to reflect it back to me.
Yeah. And I mean, this is probably, heresy to say in the yoga world, but I like to have it 2 or 3 mentors, because I feel different mentors have different strengths. And so I like to bounce it off two trusted people. I have 2 main ones, and they're very different humans, and then have it reflected back to me in 2 ways. But not everybody likes that. I know many people have a guru and that works for them.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying. Everyone has different strengths, but I do think it's really important, because I think we can fool ourselves a lot, and not out of just wanting to think we're right, but we just can't see it because we're in it, right? We can't see it. And it's like when you're sick and you don't think you're that sick, but then when you come out of it, you're like, wow, I was really sick. But you don't realize it at the time. It's the same when we're clouded in our judgment or making wrong decisions. We don't see it because it's our truth at that time. And only someone from outside can witness us and go, hey, you're off right now. You're on the wrong path. And, hopefully with somebody in a position that we trust and is a mentor or coach or counselor or whatever, that they will tell us gently and with compassion and so on, and be a voice that we will listen to, even in a time when we don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I'll just tell you a very quick story that I got in a car accident and hit my head. And I did have a concussion, but I didn't think I had a concussion. And so I kept saying, no, I'm fine. And a certain person in my life was like, you are not fine. You are not yourself. You need to go to the doctor. Okay. And I swore to God, I was fine. I really thought I was. And it was only 2 years later that I started thinking more clearly and didn't have this concussion anymore, that I was like, oh my God, I was not okay.
Isn't it? It's amazing how we don't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how that is our reality at that moment.
It's true. And we grasp onto it. Yeah. So that leads us to our last one, Ishvara Pranidhana, which I already alluded to, is very connected to non-grasping, or Aparigraha, that it is only through our ability to not grasp, and also to do this self-study, that we can surrender, that we can have complete freedom with no expectations, right? It's so beautiful. I never knew how to have Ishvara Pranidhana until I saw the Yamas and Niyamas outline like this, that number 5 Yama works with number 5 Niyama, right? The Aparigraha with the Ishvara Pranidhana, but also number 4 Niyama Svadhyaya leads to number 5 Niyama Ishvara Pranidhana. So it really, conceptualizing it in this way has helped me understand, well, how can I do that when I don't know how to surrender? What are some ways I could work on it?
Yeah, it's a wonderful way, because then you just go back to the root, which is then the 5th Yama, which is non-possessiveness, non-grasping.
Right. Yeah. And also the Niyama that comes before it, the self-study. And
like we were talking about, this is the letting go of control, letting go of that little ego, letting go of attachment. And we're being forced to do this right now.
We completely are. I mean, that's the top floor of the whole Yama Niyama building. This is the penthouse, the 10th floor is, can you surrender into this? And as we talked about earlier, the other ones of Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Saucha, Santosha, Tapa, Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, they're all building on one another. So if we're lacking in one of the lower floors, it's going to impact the penthouse of Ishvara Pranidhana.
Absolutely. And this is it. It's that step-by-step process. There's no shortcuts. We can't go from Ahimsa straight to Ishvara Pranidhana. You have to go through the other steps. You have to make sure the foundation is solid.
There's no spiritual bypassing, right?
No. Thank you, Amy. I think this is just such valuable information. And again, we had planned to discuss this months ago, and it just wasn't the right time for many reasons. And now, of course, it's come at the perfect timing when, we're coming out of confinement. We're all experiencing this time of like, what is going on? What's the future? And I think this is a beautiful reflection time and a time to look at these yamas and niyamas. So I really appreciate you taking the time to go through it with us. I think it can give a really great framework to people about how to go through this uncertain time.
Absolutely. It's been lovely. It's been, preparing for this all week has helped me get back to my roots and my yamas and niyamas.
And I was about to say that too. It's a great reminder. We always, even though, I've studied these before a long time ago now when I did my yoga teacher trainings, but, it's a great reminder again. I think we constantly need to keep these on hand just to remind ourselves, because goodness knows we get tested all the time. Right? And we get tested daily, I think. And always remembering that these yamas and niyamas and keeping them in the back of our mind, I think is really key.
Or even in the front of our mind.
Front of our mind, right? Yeah. Right there.
Right there.
Well, Amy, this was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing this information with us. I think it's really valuable. And I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. Please let us know what you think over at the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. But again, Amy, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to connect with you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, my dear. And we'll chat again soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Take good care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Amy, and please check out the show notes where you'll find that download of the yamas and niyamas. You'll also find a link to Amy's website and a link to the Elements website where if you want support, I offer consultations, private cleanses. I also have the Daily Habits for a Holistic Health course, which is an ongoing online course that's self-paced. And if you have any questions on my services, I offer a free 15-minute online call where I can answer any of your questions. So please check out all those in the show notes. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the podcast and maybe rate and review it. I would truly appreciate that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself. Be well. And ciao for now.